Well, today you get to sit in my lap as I tell you a Bible story. So today starts a new series, The Bible Tells Me So. And what we're going to be doing for the next several weeks is we're going to be diving into Bible stories that we've known for years. Okay? Now, if you didn't grow up in the church, I don't want to assume that you know these stories, but a lot of these stories are going to be stories that you have heard, whether you've grown up in church or not. And my challenge to you is that you wouldn't just write off these stories right now and just go, oh, I have heard this before, over and over and over and over again. This story, this message must be for the kids. Now, our kids are in here with us this morning, and kids, this message is for you. Teenagers, this message is for you. Adults, this message is for you. We've got our little classroom set up over here, and as I was thinking through this this message series, I kind of get sentimental about things, and I was reminded of my Sunday school classroom growing up, and it wasn't this big. But it was about this small, and we had the little crescent table. Do you guys, anybody, little crescent table where all the kids sat here and the sweet old lady sat right here and did this and passed us out our papers. And we would get these coloring pages that we would get to color that went around with the message. And then she would tell the story, and we'd have this felt board. Now, it wasn't this big, but we'd have this green felt board, probably about half this size, and or it could have been a magnet board. And she would have these little figures. And these figures would tell a story, right? And so she would illustrate this story while we're sitting around the crescent table. And, she'd say things like, so Moses died, and the Israelites needed a new leader. So God had a leader in mind. And Moses died. So, no, he's probably more like, he's gone. We'll just say he's gone. And so God raised up a new leader, and that new leader was Joshua. And Joshua led the people into a place that God didn't allow Moses to lead them, into the promised land, this land that he promised them years and years and years ago. And so Moses began leading the people, and so she would do stuff like that, and she would illustrate it, and we'd color the pictures. And the thing about these stories, we may call them kids' stories, but really what they are is they are things that happen in Scripture, and we take things and we help kids start to learn certain truths when they are younger. And one of the truths that we want kids to learn is that we serve a God who is reliable, who does what he says he will do, and can do way more than we could ever ask or imagine. And so we take these stories and we illustrate that. And our hope is that later on in life, they learn enough and they become acquainted enough with these stories that when we get to be adults, we see these stories in different ways. So this story today is for everybody. And again, please don't write it off just because you've read it over and over or you have heard it over and over, there is still much to learn. So I'm going to need some kids, though, to help me. And it's okay if they're teenagers, young kids. If we got any adults who are just getting fidgety and you're like, I need to stand up, I'd take you too, okay? Josh, yeah, you'll be good at this. So Josh, come on up. Marshall, Paisley, Eli, Chloe. I'm trying to figure out, yeah, John, come on up. Is there anybody else? Yeah, Olivia, come on up. I don't know how many I need, so I'm just kind of winging it here. Caleb, yeah, come on up. Jacob? Yeah, you're always good at this stuff too. All right, so was there anybody else? I don't leave anybody out because I mean, someone's point. Oh, Kellen, yeah. I told you you like to come up here. So what I'm going to need you guys to do is right around that corner, right over here, there's some boxes. So will you just follow me? I won't have you sit in the chairs here. So over here, not those boxes. So everybody's going to grab a box, okay? And yeah, go ahead. And then walk to the front. There you go. Josh, can you grab a couple of boxes? All right. There you go. There you go. Oh, there's more over here. Jacob, you can't get 3.
Can I grab 2? Can I grab 2?
You got it, Marcus? John, Marcus. I called you Marcus. Okay. Well, okay, maybe you can get 2. All right, so yeah, go ahead and take them up. There's a couple more. There you get creative. He won't give up. He's going to bring more than one. It doesn't matter. You're doing great. Come on, you got it. See? Okay, so what I need you guys to do is I need you to build right here, I need you to build a 4x4 wall. Okay, build a 4x4 wall here.
1, 2.
No, we're going to go like this. Okay, so put that down there, Olivia. So there we go. Yeah, on top of it. Yeah, 4 across and 4 up. Sorry. Guess I could have been more. There's 2 more back there. It might be the walls of Jericho. Okay, so Jericho was a fortified city, and this isn't going to adequately represent Jericho and how fortified it was, but it was a city that would have been surrounded by these walls. Now, archaeologists have actually dug up portions of the wall of Jericho, the city of Jericho, and obviously we learned that the walls of Jericho fell, right? But they were rebuilt at different points. But what they found was the archaeologists found the foundation of these walls. And in places, the walls of Jericho, the foundation was 25 feet wide, right? So the width, just the width of the walls, not the length, the foundation was 25 feet wide. They believe that these walls could have been anywhere from 70 to 80 feet tall. Think about that. This was a fortified city, and it was surrounded by these walls. So I'm going to tell this story. I'm going to read it, and you guys are going to help illustrate, okay? So you're going to march, right? Some of you are going to have trumpets. Others of you are going to walk behind you guys decide what you want to do, okay? But we just need to help our adults kind of have a visual, because sometimes they get bored. They need to see something besides my salmon and blue shirt, okay? So this is in Joshua chapter 6, okay? I'm just going to read it. You guys illustrate it for us. They need your help, okay? All right, so here we go. The gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. Now, you guys are the Israelites. You're not the people of Jericho. So, yeah. The Lord said to Joshua, now listen to what the Lord said to Joshua. See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its kings and its fighting men. Now, these are just the instructions. Don't do it yet. The instructions are, do you do this in school where they give you instructions and you start doing it and then you don't listen? Yes, okay. Don't do that here. March around the city once with all the armed men. I feel like I just went over this. Okay, here are the instructions. Stand still until Joshua says go. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse. And don't collapse the wall yet. And the army will go up, everyone straight in. So this is the battle plan. Right? This is the battle plan right here. March around the city, do it once a day. On the 7th day, do it 7 times. Everybody shout really loud, and the walls are going to fall. I didn't say go. My name isn't Joshua, and you're not an Israelite. So Joshua, in a way you are. Some theology in there somewhere. So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests, and he told them this. This is what's going to happen. All right? Joshua got up early the next morning. Here's where you go. And the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord. This is where they started marching around the walls. Together, like in the same direction. And they started blowing the trumpets, and the armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord while the trumpets kept sounding. On the 2nd day, they marched around the city once and returned to camp, just like they did on the 1st day. They did this for 6 days. 6 days. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and they marched around the city. On that day, they marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. The 7th time around, I'm getting ahead. Let's pretend this is the 7th time. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, shout! For the Lord has given you this city. Joshua said that too. For the Lord. Then the walls fell down. Wait. Oh. It does say they took the city, but not the walls. All right? Hey, thank you for your help illustrating. Give them a hand. That's good. Just leave it up here. Just leave it here. It's fine. Just leave it in shambles. That's fine. All right. No, we're good. Thank you. They gave you a hand. This is where you go back to your seat now. Thanks, Jacob. You guys are awesome. Thanks for your help. So the battle plan to take this city was to march. That was the plan. Now, if you think about it, any military plan that they would have come up with would have never worked. Thank you. I do want people to see my pants. So that's good. Thanks. All right. Thank you. Thank you. You're going to be a stagehand someday. Any military plan they would have come up with would have never worked. If you've got walls that are 25 feet thick and 70 to 80 feet high, and your weapons consist most likely of rocks and sticks, you're not going to get very far. Luckily, they had a leader named Joshua, who was smart enough to say, we can't do this on our own. we can't not do this our way. See, Joshua knew something. He knew that he had someone else on his side. He knew that he had more at his disposal. Not that God is at our disposal. That sounds like kind of a bad way to say that. But he knew that he had something else in his arsenal that could help them accomplish what needed to be done. Because what needed to be done was told to them by the person that they had in their arsenal. And I want you to hear this. Joshua knew something else. Right before this, starting in chapter 6, right before this, starting in chapter 5, verse 13, now Joshua, when he was near Jericho, he looked up and he saw a man in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us or are you for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied, "but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" Now at this point, I'm assuming that Joshua was expecting a battle plan. What message does the Lord have for his servant? He's expecting, here's the message. Take your sticks, take your rocks, take all the people you have, assemble them in this way, do this, do that. Try to dig a hole under that wall, try to scale that wall. That's what Joshua was expecting. Here's the message that the Lord had for Joshua. The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. See, God needed to remind Joshua of something. He needed to remind him of where his power rested, where his strength rested. The location wasn't holy ground. What was holy ground was that he was in the presence of the Lord. And for God to tell Joshua, "Don't forget, you are in the presence of the Lord," would have told a man like Joshua, which we'll talk in just a minute about his past and what he had learned about God, would have told him God was saying, "I've got this. Don't forget whose presence you are in." That was the battle plan initially. I'm the Lord and I've got this. Don't forget whose presence you're in. But this story teaches us a number of things. The first thing it teaches us is that God's ways are not our ways. And for the next several weeks, that's kind of going to be the theme. Is God's ways are not our ways. We see all throughout Scripture stories like this, Old Testament, New Testament, where there's a problem, someone's in trouble, somebody needs something to happen, and they start, a lot of times, just like we do, by thinking rationally about how to solve this problem. I've got this going on. How do I do that? I need more money. So what do? Well, I go get a job. Well, the job I have isn't making enough money, so I'm going to go get another job. I've got this relationship that's strained. I don't know what to do. What do I do? And so we start going through all these rational processes of how we've been taught to fix our financial situation, how to fix our relationships, how to fix our marriages, how to fix our kids that have gone away from the Lord, how to fix our kids who are just a mess right now. Kids, you might lay in bed at night. I don't know. You might lay in bed at night and go, how do I fix my parents? Now, in some ways, that could be kind of funny. For some of you, that's not very funny. There are a lot of kids in this world that I think go to bed at night and go, how do I fix this? How do I get through this? And we take our rational ways, just like I'm assuming Joshua may have struggled with, may have said, we were supposed to take Jericho. So you're telling me you bring us into the promised land, you bring us this whole way, Lord, and this is the promised land? Like this is the land flowing with milk and honey? This is what you'd promised to us? And the first thing they get in there, oh yeah, now you've got to take that city. In order to possess the promised land, you've got to take that city. Oh, and by the way, it's got big walls around it, and you're never going to be able to do it. Joshua must have been going, oh, okay. But take off your sandals because the place you're standing is holy ground. I've got your back. Joshua possessed something that we need more of. He possessed trust and he possessed faith. And I don't want to get into a long theological discussion about the differences between trust and faith. A lot of times in the Bible, it is used interchangeably, but there are many instances where it's very specific why they use one of those words or the other. And I might argue with some theologians who say, it's the same word. I'm on the side that says those are two different words. See, trust is often a reaction, right? Trust is a reaction to something that we've learned. We've learned that we can trust something or someone. See, Joshua learned that he could trust this commander of the army of the Lord, which was essentially the Lord himself, or a messenger of the Lord himself, saying, take off your sandals, the place you're standing is holy ground. So for Joshua to hear that, it wasn't such a big deal, because if you go back and you think about the things that the Israelites had experienced, the things that Joshua himself had experienced, see, back in chapter 3, we had another river crossing. Okay? Remember the Israelites had already experienced the Red Sea parting, but back in Joshua chapter 3, they come upon the Jordan River, and it's like, so that's the promised land, and we got this big river in front of us, so what do we do now? And God says, oh yeah, remember how I parted the Red Sea? Well, I'll do that again. So gather your tribe, gather your people, and I'll stop the water, you cross. And they did. So for God to come and say, I've got this, I can imagine that Joshua thought, I can trust this. I can trust God because I've seen what he has done already. I can imagine the Israelite people, when Joshua gathered them and said, okay guys, here's the battle plan, here's how we're going to take this city. I'm sure there was some going, okay. But they'd just seen the God who was on their side part the waters. And they walked past on dry ground. So they had learned to trust. See, trust is a reaction. It's a thought process based on things that have already happened. Faith is an action. Faith is a physical response. Faith and trust go hand in hand. But trust is a reaction to something that we already know. Faith is that response as we walk into or move into the future. Faith requires action. See, this is where I think we need to think a little bit better about what faith is. We throw the word faith around and we say, my faith. My faith has gotten stronger. Well, if that doesn't coincide with you actually doing something, then your faith has not gotten stronger. your will to follow God may be getting stronger. It may be growing. But Scripture shows us all through this that faith requires action. If action does not accompany faith, then it is not faith. Our faith is confirmed with action, but that action goes hand in hand. Because obedience really is our faith. Now, I don't want to get too deep here. I don't want to confuse anybody. This sermon, this message really isn't about the difference between trust and faith. It's really about obedience. And obedience is what we see Joshua and the Israelites do. That's the model. That's the example that I want us to see today. See, obedience is our actions in faith that are a result of knowing God's will. So God shared with Joshua, here's the plan, I'm with you, and here's the plan, here's what you're going to do. The obedience is when we go, oh, there's the faith. They did it. See, it's one thing, and here's where we can fall short, and I can fall short, right? I can say, I believe God will do something. I believe that God can do this. I believe that God can empower me to do this. I believe that I'm supposed to do this and that God is there and that He will help me along the way. If I do not do said thing, then what's the point? Right? What's the point? You think about inventions that have happened or entrepreneurs, innovations that have taken place. Most of the time, if you look back through the history of innovation, the people who get recognized aren't the people that come up with the idea. It's the people who say, you know, that is a good idea, and I'm going to go do it. A lot of times the people who come up with the idea are too scared to put the idea into action. And that's what happens a lot of times with our faith. Is we say, my faith is strong. And I believe that God says, show me. Show me. And so that's what Joshua does. Let's look back just briefly, because Joshua had a foundation. He knew what God's will was. He knew how to find God's will. First of all, we learned that we find God's will in His Word, in His Scripture, in the words that come out of His mouth. In Joshua 1, 7 and 8, God says to Joshua when He's saying, hey, you're going to lead my people now. He says, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Can you imagine being commissioned in that way? But see, Joshua also found God's will in prayer. In chapter 10, after this whole Jericho thing, they continue from city to city, taking cities and conquering this promised land. They're in the midst of a battle, right? And you can read the whole thing. But in chapter 10, verses 12 through 14, they're in the middle of a battle. Like a battle is taking place, and we know that Joshua isn't one of those that just stands back and lets everybody, do their thing, and I'm going to listen to God and tell you all what to do. Like, he's in the midst of it, and in the midst of it, he stops and he prays. In the midst of the battle, he stops and he prays. And how many of us, when we are in the thick of it, when we're in the midst of the battle, have the capacity, have the reminder to go, up. I'm going to stop here for just a second. And I'm going to see what God says about this. This is the part where he asks God, hey, can you stop the sun for just a little while? Because we kind of need the daylight. God goes, yeah, well, I'll stop it for a while. I wonder what would happen had Joshua not asked for something so outrageous. Obedience leads to victory. Obedience leads to victory. And it's not just here in this battle. And I'm not just talking about victory and winning battles and winning military campaigns. Scripture has told us that Jesus has already been victorious. Just like God told Joshua. Listen to what he says in verse 2. The Lord said to Joshua, before any of this happened, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its kings and its fighting men. He said, I've already done it. It's done. I just need you to do your part. It's done. The victory is won. I just need you to do your part, Joshua. We must be steadfast in our obedience. That's a word some of you younger people may not know. Steadfast just means we must endure. Endure is a word some of you younger ones might not know. We've got to keep going. When it comes to understanding God's will and being obedient to God, it doesn't always, and please hear this, I would even say it rarely comes right away. The answer rarely comes right away. Don't you think that God could have said, look, Joshua, I'm going to do this. I don't need you to march around the city. Or he could have said, you know what, Joshua, I just need to make sure you're going to be obedient. Can you I'm going to have you march around the city one time. No, he said, I need you to do this one time every day, except for the seventh day, I need you to do it 7 times, and then I need you to shout. There was nothing about the marching and nothing about the shouting that knocked those walls down. But what it did do was it showed God that those people, those Israelites, that Joshua were willing to do what it took to be obedient so that God would be willing to do his thing. Now that doesn't mean that God's up there going, hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But it does mean that God expects an obedience. Does anyone ever scratch each other's back, by the way? Does that happen? Okay. It's a weird saying. When we are faced with insurmountable odds, we must learn that our Jericho victories are won only when our faithful obedience to God is complete. Now let me read that one more time. When we're faced with insurmountable odds, we must learn that our Jericho victories are won only when our faithful obedience to God is complete. See, a lot of times, obedience is more than just, well, I did that one thing that God asked me to do, and He didn't answer my prayer. Perhaps obedience is more than just that one thing. Perhaps it's that one thing over and over and over again until God says, thank you, because now is when my timing is perfect. But too many times we go, well, I did it. God asked me to do this, and I did it, and nothing happened. God asked me to start that ministry, and it flopped. God asked me to do this, and I was terrible at it, and we quit. God asked me to do this, and there was a bunch of red tape that I had to jump through, and it just wasn't worth it. God asked me to do this, and it just didn't really, I did it once, and it just didn't, it wasn't in my giftedness. Perhaps part of the obedience is you do it over and over and over again, and God begins to bless and gives you and grows that giftedness. Perhaps you do it over and over and over and over again, and you're obedient, and God says, this time, it's going to work. You were right back then. Just because it flopped doesn't mean you were wrong. Just needed you to keep working at it. Just needed you to grow. Just needed you to learn. Just needed to make sure that you were really, truly relying on me. So I ask you this as we prepare to close here. What does your Jericho wall look like? What does your wall look like? What is that thing, that massive structure that's right in front of you, and you're going, God, I just made it through this. I thought I was done. I thought we had arrived. You guys ever done that? Right? If I could only get through this, my life is going to be just fine. If I can only figure this out, it's going to be just fine. And boom, you get through it. Oh, there's Jericho. What do your Jericho walls look like? Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a job situation. Maybe it's something physical. I'm looking at 3 or 4 of you because I've talked to you this week. Maybe you just got some terrible news. And that 25-foot thick wall, 80-foot high, and you're standing there with a stick going, what am I supposed to do now? And God says, I'm the commander of the Lord's army. Get your shoes off and don't forget whose presence you're in. God is the same today as He was back there with Joshua. It's the same God, same power, same desire to call you to obedience and then to crumble those walls. He is. I promise you that.